Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today we're going to be taking a look at 3 mini gaming systems sent to me for review. We've got the C64 Black Edition here, we've got the Pac-Man Edition of the Atari 2600 Plus, and we've got the new Intellivision Sprint, plus they've sent a bunch of games. This is going to be super fun. Let's take a look. Alright, so the first one we're going to take a look at is the Atari 2600 Plus, the Pac-Man Edition. So this retails for $170, and as you can see here, it's a brand new version of the iconic console, but this time in Pac-Man Yellow. And I have to say, I really like this. I thought this was so cool that they did this because it's for collectors like me. It's for people who have had an Atari for literally decades and they wanted to kind of jazz it up a little bit, you know, do something special for Pac-Man, and I thought that they nailed it here. Now, if you're not familiar with this particular version of the 2600, basically what it lets you do is play your old physical cartridges on a modern system. And what's cool is that it not only supports 2600 cartridges, but you can also play 7800 cartridges, which are typically a little bit more advanced looking, a little bit better graphics. Maybe the gameplay is a little bit more complicated. So it plays both of those and also new games that are made today. However, it's important to know that it doesn't come with any games built in. That can be a bit of confusion for people who maybe aren't familiar with this, or you've seen a bunch of these kind of mini consoles come out over the years. Just know this is designed for people who have a physical game collection. That said, this does come with one cartridge, so it includes this Pac-Man double feature, which is a 2-in-1 cartridge. And by the way, this also comes with a special edition Pac-Man joystick, so a wireless joystick as well, all come in the box here. They didn't stop there, so they also sent this pink colored controller, which represents one of the ghosts in the Pac-Man game. They actually have 5 special colored edition controllers for people like me who would want to collect them all. Now that is pretty cool. I love how Atari went all in on this special edition console. By the way, if you're not crazy about the classic 2600 controller, you know, it can be a little stiff, a little uncomfortable for some people. Well, they do sell a gamepad style controller as well, and it works with this, so that's probably going to be better for people who are more familiar with, like, say, an NES style gamepad, maybe younger gamers, and it's also wireless, so if you prefer that, consider it. Each of these consoles all come with USB-C cables to power these devices, as well as HDMI cables to connect to your newer television. They all output 720p, and then I'm capturing that footage and then upscaling it to 4K for YouTube. That's what's going on here. As you can see here, the front of this is illuminated with Pac-Man characters across the front. Again, another little detail. I just think that looks so cool. As I mentioned, they also sent me 8 Atari 7800 games, which also work on this. And so here are some of the highlights. The first one being, of course, we got to talk about the Pac-Man double feature cartridge. So there are 2 games on this cartridge, and the way that they handle this is that there is a physical dip switch built onto the cartridge, and depending on how you configure that is what game is actually going to boot. The new and improved Pac-Man that's on here was actually programmed in 2025, which is pretty cool because it brings some new features. Specifically, there are selectable lives right there, as well as you can adjust the speed of the game so you can actually make it super fast. But the big feature here is that you can play randomized mazes. That's pretty cool if you feel like you've kind of seen it all with the classic Pac-Man and you want to be surprised each time you play this game. I thought that's a very neat feature. And this is a really good version of Pac-Man. There's actually been several now over the years, but if you need to be reminded what we got back in 1982, well, that original version of Pac-Man is also on here. And oh man, I absolutely despised this game as a kid. Again, back in 1982, I was pumped, man. I was like, I had my Atari and I was excited to get Pac-Man. But I will admit that over the years, I've kind of softened on this version a bit, because now I know as an adult kind of how hard it is to program on the Atari at that time. And I guess they had very little time to make it, and also very little memory on the physical cartridge itself. So you have both versions on here, which is pretty fun. Also included in the box is a full color manual that goes into the history of the making of both the new version of Pac-Man as well as the original 1982 version. That was really neat to sit down and read that, because it goes into the art as well as some of the technical challenges and stuff like that. Plus, also it gives you hints and tips on how to play both versions of the game. It's awesome. The next cartridge I popped in was for Countermeasure 2, and this is pretty cool. I hadn't played this before, and this plays a lot like the classic game Combat, but instead of being confined to a single screen, this is a scrolling landscape that you drive around, and then you take out other tanks and guns, and there's also power-ups to pick up. So I thought this was pretty fun. It was a total surprise. Next up is a game I had played before on the 7800, that is Dark Chambers, and this one plays pretty much like Gauntlet. It's very similar to Gauntlet. If you like that style of game, this is going to be probably right up your alley. Next up is Bounty Bob Strikes Back, and whew, boy, this is a pretty tough game. The whole premise here is that you have to walk Bounty Bob across every surface, and essentially what it does is fills that in. You see it as he walks along, and you basically are platforming around trying to avoid enemies and also falling to your death. This is a very tough game, and it has that old school challenge to it. Not sure if I like it or not, but it might be something that you enjoy. Next up is Exevious, which is a game I love playing in the arcade. This is a super fun shooter, and this is a really good version here. I like how they map both types of attack to a single button. So basically, you shoot enemies out of the sky and you bomb targets on the ground with just a single button. So this is a pretty cool version of the game. I like it. And then I checked out Food Fight, and this is just a classic arcade conversion. This is one of the better games that came out on the 7800 in my opinion. This is a really fun game where basically you're just trying to get to an ice cream cone and eat it while trying to avoid enemies. And what you can do is you can hit them with food, hence the name Food Fight, right? So yeah, this is a really fun game. It's one of the best on that system, and it runs great on this. And as I mentioned, this is really designed for people who have and collect Atari games, and so I happen to have a bunch of them. I just tried a couple of my favorites here, and everything that I threw at it ran just fine, including Hero, of course. I have to try Hero every chance I can possibly get to play that game. But I was surprised and happy to see that it also supports newer homebrew games as well. So I popped in a couple of those, including Halo 2600 and a few others, and so yeah. This is a cool new version of the Atari 2600 Plus. I dig it. All right, next up is the C64 Mini. This is the Black Edition, and this typically goes for around $120. This is a special all-black version of the classic Commodore 64 home computer, which I adored as a kid. This is basically just a repaint of their pretty cool mini console that came out a couple years ago, and I do think that the all-black version of this looks pretty nice. It also comes with a all-black controller that many of us used back in the 1980s with our real C64s. Although I'll be honest, that particular controller is not necessarily my favorite because it is pretty stiff. However, this version of it has a couple custom buttons built into it, designed specifically for this system. So for instance, one of the buttons on there will bring up a virtual keyboard. Another one will take you back to the main menu and stuff like that. So not my favorite controller, and you don't necessarily have to use it, but it's nice that it has some of those features kind of built into it to make it easier to use. It's important to know that this does not come with a working keyboard. It actually kind of looks like it, but that's just plastic and for show. They actually sell a larger version of this with a working keyboard if you prefer that. And the big selling point for me with this is that it includes 25 all new games. This time they're focusing on newer homebrew games, and When I say new games, I mean it. Almost all of the games that are pre-installed on this are new for the Commodore 64 in, like, say, the past 5 or 10 years. And so while I grew up with the Commodore 64 as a kid, and I know all those classic games, I don't really follow any of the newer homebrew games. So when I learned that, I was like very intrigued. I was like, okay, this is gonna be cool to check out. And I should probably clarify here that you don't have to just stick with the games that are pre-installed on this. Actually, if you've got all those older Commodore 64 ISOs and ROMs on a USB stick, just plug it into this and it'll detect them, which is pretty cool. So you can literally play thousands of Commodore games on this device. With that said, let's go ahead and check out some of the games. First up is a Pig Quest. And this is a traditional platforming game. Now, the thing that you need to know and understand about a lot of these games is that back in the day on the C64, when you wanted to jump in a lot of these games, you would push up on the controller. And that seems really odd now, right? You never do that in modern games, but a lot of these are programmed to be like that. So just be aware, you'll get used to it relatively quick, but that's kind of what's going on here. And I thought this was a pretty decent platforming game. I'm not very far into it yet, but I thought it was pretty cool so far. Next up is a game that definitely piqued my interest, and that is Metal Warrior Ultra. This is a side-scrolling adventure game that has beat 'em up and run and gun shooting elements to it. So in this game, you play as a long-haired heavy metal guitarist who battles street games and mutant beasts and robots and soldiers. And there's like 800 different screens to go through. It's a pretty big game. So I got quickly addicted to this. I thought this is pretty awesome. And yeah, definitely one you shouldn't skip. Next up is Nixie. So this is a platforming game that really reminded me of Montezuma's Revenge with its single screen platforming, but also its difficulty. This is a game that you need to be patient with, but it seems pretty decent so far. I'm just not sure if I have the patience for it yet. Next up is Sam's Journey, and this is a really popular action platforming game that I had heard about as being very high quality. And I have to say, yeah, it did not disappoint here. So this is a really well-made quality game. This could easily have come out back then and been full price in retail. It would have been massively popular. So there's 27 levels in this game. You run, jump, you climb, you swim. Plus there's all sorts of secrets to find and new abilities to unlock. This is clearly one of the best games on this console, and if you get this, yeah, definitely put some time in here. It's awesome. Run and Gun is it's a run and gun action game, as the name suggests. Probably inspired by Contra a bit, I would assume, But so far it seems pretty good from what I've played. Haven't played it a ton yet, but I'm digging it so far. Next up is Steel Ranger. So this is a Metroid-style shooter where you play as Ranger with an armored suit, facing off against a bunch of robots in very diverse environments. And yeah, you're definitely going to get some Samus and Super Metroid vibes from this game. Seems pretty cool. Now we're going to move on to the Intellivision Sprint. This came out of nowhere. I was surprised to hear this when it was announced, but I was also very curious. Now this is going to set you back about $150. Back in the early 80s, Intellivision was a competitor to the Atari 2600, and I remember it being slightly more powerful. I remember kids at school kind of bragging a little bit that they had the more powerful console at home, and I was a little bit jealous, I'll be honest with you. So it's a trip that now this Intellivision console is owned and brought to you by Atari. Man, have things changed. But I have to say, they nailed it. The Intellivision Sprint really retains that authentic look and feel of the original, but they've obviously modernized it because it has HDMI output. It's got these wireless controllers, plus this one includes 45 built-in games. It's important to know that this console does not have a slot to put in real physical cartridges like the Atari 2600 Plus. So instead, this only plays digital games. However, it is possible to add your own Intellivision games You know, if you've got ROMs, you put them on a USB stick and you plug them into the back here, and then suddenly you could have access to the entire library. So I just want to mention that because I'm sure people will probably ask. And I do love the look of this, from the fake wood grain styling to the gold accents. I mean, this could fit perfectly in like a 1980s rec room with shag carpeting and a turntable cranking some Van Halen, right? Another thing that they're doing here, and I thought it's pretty cool, is that there are overlays for every game, each with their own designs. So basically they are including 2 packages with all of these overlays for every game. And essentially what you do is you slide them into the controller, and that helps you figure out how to play these things. It was really cool back when this first came out, and what's awesome is that these overlays work with the original Intellivision controllers too. So if you happen to have an original Intellivision, you can use these overlays with that as well. Now, I didn't grow up with the Intellivision. I was a 2600 kid, so I don't really have a lot of nostalgia for this, but I can definitely see the appeal. However, for me, I don't love these controllers. The disc at the bottom, it works fine as a directional pad. You know, you basically can go up, down, left, and right. That all works fine. But pushing the side buttons and using those numbers never really feels comfortable for me. So just keep that in mind if you're gonna get this. Now, you don't have to use these controllers. You can actually plug in a third-party USB controller for Windows or whatever. But if you want the experience, you're probably going to use these controllers, and just be aware. I mention that because, again, I'm not very nostalgic for this system, and there really aren't a ton of games that I'm very excited about with this, to be honest. You know, there's 45 of them built in here, and some of them are fun. Some of them don't hold up probably quite as well. That said, there are some great games here, including Shark. I love this game. So the premise of this is very simple. You start off as a small fish, and as you eat fish of the same size or smaller, well, you start to grow. And that gives you the ability to eat larger fish. And you're trying to do this all while avoiding the bigger fish that are around, including that dreaded shark, which will take you out in one bite, right? It's very simple. It's a classic for a reason, and it's still fun today. The other game included on here that I really love is Boulder Dash. Now, I originally played this again on my Commodore 64 back in the day, but this version is really fun too. Actually, it's basically the same thing, and just the graphics are a little bit more simple. But what goes on here is that you are trying to pick up all the gems that are buried in the earth, and you need to avoid digging where a boulder can fall and smash you. This is way trickier than it sounds. You actually need to stop and think about what you're going to do sometimes, because again, as you dig holes in the earth, well, boulders may fall and crush you or cut you off from where you need to go. So a lot of thought goes into this game. It's actually a blast to play even today. And there are a bunch of other games included on here. I tried a motorcycle game which had wacky controls. I was actually kind of getting into it, but also too, it's like, it's so primitive, right? And if you didn't grow up with it, then you're kind of like, why am I playing this? Plus a bunch of sports games. The Intellivision was known for having better sports games than the Atari, just because it was a little bit more powerful. But again, I don't play a lot of sports games, so I don't really care. But your mileage will vary. I suspect the person who probably ends up buying this did grow up with it, as a kid and wants to relive a lot of that stuff. And so this is going to be perfect for you. And with that, these are the 3 mini consoles that I added to my game room recently, and I want to thank PlayOn for sending me these for review. Really fun going through here, playing a bunch of stuff either I hadn't played in years or games that were completely new to me, so that's always a blast. I'll put links to these products down in the video description below if you want to check them out as well. And as always, guys, I want to thank you for watching my channel, thank you for subscribing, and take care.